up here. I heard some good stuff, but I want to clarify that when you see, because this is the thing on AP test day, when you get a prompt and it asks you about foreign policy, make sure you write about foreign policy. All right, so I hear about like the bank, I hear about the Alien Sedition Acts, I hear like some important stuff that we should for sure know. But foreign policy just deals with our relationships with other countries. What do we do foreign policies? What are our relationships? What are our interactions? What are our negotiations? What are our issues? What are our conflicts with other countries? Yes, Chavez.
Wouldn't the Alien Sedition Act also be foreign policy, not letting people from outside?
Depends on how you argue it. So yes, it could be depending on how. Good start. Depends on what you do with it. Okay? So if you argue it's a foreign policy and talk about how it damages the Federalists domestically, then it wouldn't work because you're not talking about the foreign impacts. Right? So in general, these first three presidents, how can we summarize or categorize our foreign policy, please? Elion, so you can get back on my good side. 2 strikes and Elion. In general, how can we categorize or summarize our first 3 foreign policy presidents?
The first 2 were more like they wanted to focus more on the development of the United States.
Okay.
And then Jefferson was the outcast and wanting to help other people or other nations.
Sure. But all 3 of them have what in common, Santos?
All 3 presidents wanted to avoid war.
Yeah. Right? The big driving factor of early American foreign policy is avoiding foreign conflict. Who has some examples of this avoiding of foreign conflict? Talk to me, then talk to me. Go ahead.
The first one would be like Washington, the Proclamation of Neutrality.
Beautiful. Washington's Proclamation of Neutrality, which deals with which conflict?
The French Revolution.
The French Revolution and the French-British conflict that comes along with it. Absolutely. Good.
Jefferson introducing the Embargo Act.
Embargo Act. So absolutely, that should for sure be in your notes. Embargoing other countries is a way to avoid war. Excellent. Brett, say something else. There's other examples of us doing things that help us avoid conflict.
The treaties.
The treaties. What are the more specific?
Jay's Treaty.
Jay's Treaty and Pinckney's Treaty. Absolutely. Just in case. In case the lights go out. You might. My phone might die. Good job, guys. That was a good, productive, content-specific conversation with SFI. Specific, factual information. I like it. Couple things before we get too far into our conversation today. Today, obviously, we got 4.3, the War of 1812. Again, the war is not so important as what happens because of the war. I think today will be enlightening and interesting to you. I believe it's a pretty big event in terms of again, turning points, start points, end points, turning points. Don't forget, today's Thursday, so after school I will be here. There are some students who are not required to be here, but strongly suggested to be here because today's actually the formal history mentoring day. But that doesn't change anything about Thursdays are going to function like Thursdays all year. You see what I'm saying? Where you show up, I give you support on the things you need help with. If there's things you don't need help with because you're all just geniuses, then I can throw up an essay prompt and we can work on outlining essay prompts. So let Thursdays, I know last week was a little weird because last week was a test day. The week before that was a little weird because the week before was parent-teacher night. So let Thursdays become a part of your every week identity because it makes a big difference in terms of content retention, retaining information. What I noticed in the SAQs, for example, was you guys all did the very best on the one asking about the development of political parties. What you could argue at the end of the year will be the hardest question of those 3. However, on the test, it was the one we had covered most recently. It was the one that was at the end of period 3. You guys did the best on that. So that tells me that we're having a hard time retaining information over time, and that's one of the things that Thursdays really helps with, is even if you know it, making sure you keep knowing it. You stay knowing it, that it stays kicking around in those dense skulls and goes. Okay? So, in this case, very, very thin skull. So, my recommendation to you is whether you think you know it all or not, Thursdays are still a good way to make sure that you stay remembering everything. All right? So I'll be here until probably 5:15, 5:30. You know, a good solid 2 hours of my life that I'll never get back. And then I get to go home tonight and watch my first 2.5 hour grad school lecture. So, you know, Thursdays just went from the longest day of the week to the extra longest day of the week. But that does not mean that 8 Push Thursdays stop. It just means that my day gets longer. Because 8 Push Thursdays are the key to success. That's about you guys, man. Making my decisions come like this. All right, so today we discussed the War of 1812, the economic, political, and social effects of what many call the Second War for Independence. The Second War for Independence. Now, take 30 seconds, talk to your partner real quick just to get your minds woken the heck up. Why do we have a conflict with England? What's the beef? What's the issue? What's the conversation? Why are we mad at England? What can we do about it? This is not a new issue. It's a long-standing issue. Take 30 seconds, go.
Oh, yeah, like general they were taking hostage our ship. Yeah, they were forcing us to right. They were also arming Native Americans.
I see you, Santos.
Repeat yourself, Frank. Repeat yourself.
They have conflict with England because England was American ships taking the crew on board as hostage to make them fight in their way.
So I heard a really good conversation. That made me happy. Not that I need to be made happy. I'm happy most of the time as it is. I made it look angry.
No.
Oh, no, I don't look angry.
No.
Hilda, give me an example of a conflict we have with the British.
England was like attacking American naval ships, and they would take the crew and like make them fight another war.
Good, good. What is that called, Hilda? One of my favorite words because nobody can remember what it is.
Imprisonment.
Impressment.
Impressment.
You're close. That's close enough. Impressment is a problem. Good. Santos, I heard you talking about another issue. What's the other issue we have with the British?
The British were arming Native Americans with weapons.
Native Americans where?
Up north.
On the
Frontier.
On the frontier. Yeah. Okay. Good. The British are arming and training the Native Americans. The British are providing Native Americans with guns. That's what arming means. Let me do the speaking. You can do the listening. Arming the Native Americans. They're providing Native Americans with guns and alcohol. Good combination. It's about as American as it gets. Guns and booze. Get drunk and shoot shit. America. Good. Are there other issues we have with the British? There's one or two more I can think of. Anybody? Go ahead.
The trading system between the colonies and Britain.
There's no colonies anymore.
Oh wait, United States.
What are you talking about?
Like, the United States trying to trade with Britain and with Britain.
Okay, the fact they won't respect us as neutrals. That's important. How about them in the forts out here in the Great Lakes region? Right? One of the things that causes Jay's Treaty. What is the big British colony still in North America? Canada. Canada. New England is part of the United States. But the British control Canada. Some people in America want Canada because they think it's ours, because manifest destiny and whatnot. So yeah, there's a lot of issues in us in England. Would you say at this point, do we have more in common with England or against England? Against. For the rest of history, though, after this event, really for the most part, we'll become besties with England. Realizing we both white, we both speak English, we came from you. Right, you can almost look at this as like when kids grow up and they fight with their parents. Yes. All right, right now you guys are teenagers, you probably fight with your parents. All right, all kinds of stuff. All right. We got Luis running out in the streets flexing on people and whatnot.
You're hating message.
Hating on what?
On the process. I'm trusting the process.
Probably a 30-year process at this point. Are you doing anything about the process, or are you just trusting that eventually it's going to happen? Cool, excellent. Don't speak to me. So, you can think of this as like us growing up. We fought with our parents. We went our own way. We fought with our parents a little bit again, and then later when we get old, we're best friends with our parents. Make sense? Right? Like I couldn't stand my parents in high school. When I was in college, I also couldn't stand my parents. I just cared less because I was in college. I didn't live with them anymore. I was like, cool. Good story. Appreciate your opinion. Don't care. And now I'm closer with both of my parents. My dad lives in Sacramento, so I don't see him much. But like I still see my parents. We're on a very friendly relationship because I'm an adult and they're adults, and we're good to go. So that kind of trajectory is kind of what happens here. Right? We fought them once, moved away. The Revolutionary War. We fought them once, we moved away, but the conflict didn't stop. We fought them again, we established that we were adults now, and they're adults, and we can just be good acquaintances going forward. It's a good analogy. Your prompt is here, it's pretty straightforward. Danny, give me your first, please.
Evaluate the effects of the War of 1812, accounting for economic, political, and social outcomes.
Cool. So there's going to be a lot, and this prompt will carry us into Monday as well. We'll talk about what's called the era of good feelings. American nationalism, cultural nationalism. Only one party's left because the Federalists are going to die today. We're going to have a funeral for the Federalists.
Happy
May they
funeral
rest
day.
forever in peace.
Happy funeral day.
Why are you anti-Federalist, bro? All right. So Madison takes the presidency in 1808. Jefferson serves his 2 terms. He obviously wins in 1800. Big election, big turning point. You guys saw the election map for 1804. He wins by a ton over Pinckney, showing the Federalists are kind of struggling. Don't forget, though, the Federalists gained some credibility in Jefferson's 2nd term. Why?
Jefferson, like when he bought Louisiana from France.
No, that's his 1st term.
John Marshall in the
1st term. What's the big thing that kills Jefferson's popularity? Yes, but
Embargo Act?
the Embargo Act. Right, the Embargo Act kills Jefferson's legitimacy because people in general, they'll believe what they believe politically, but when you mess with their money, they get angry. So the Embargo Act messes with people's money, they get angry. So we see that reflected here, whereas in 1804, a lot of these states were pro-Jefferson. In 1808, they're going to be anti-democratic Republicans because of the effects of the Embargo Act. Pretty logical. The Embargo Act kills our economy, so the party in charge was the Democratic Republicans. They lose credibility. It's often how it works. So we see Madison running as a Democratic Republican. He wins still a vast majority of the states. He gets 70% of the electoral vote, whereas Jefferson was in the 90s in 1804. We see Pinckney running again unsuccessfully. At this point, if I was him, I'll probably just quit and go home and be like, I made a cool treaty. Yeah, I mean, I ran for president twice, but that didn't work out too well with my treaty. And then we see this other little faction of the independent Republicans with a man named George Clinton. He wins a little chunk of New York. But in general, the nation is still strongly behind the Democratic Republicans and James Madison. Now, Madison is really, really qualified to be president. Madison's very qualified. Madison wrote the Constitution. Madison writes the Bill of Rights. Madison had been in the first session of Congress as a representative from, anybody want to know what state? Virginia, right? Now another Virginia president. What number Virginia president is this for us?
Second. Third.
Washington? Washington, Jefferson, Madison.
Bridge.
Yeah, Washington, Jefferson, Madison. And he was Jefferson's Secretary of State. Question. Brenda, what is the Secretary of State responsible for in the cabinet? perhaps. Okay, no biggie. Johnny, remember? Because there's going to be a thing going where we're going to have to know these cabinet positions. No idea? This one, when I ask a question, nobody knows. Everyone does this. Like, what are you furiously writing? Nobody's saying anything. Give it a try. Foreign policy. Good job. Good. So, Secretary of State does our relationship with other countries. So, who else do we know at this point who was the Secretary of State? Jefferson. Hamilton was Treasury. Treasury. He's money. Hamilton's money. What did Jefferson become after being Secretary of State? President. What's Madison becoming after being Secretary of State? So there's an ongoing theme in American history. It's going to set us up nicely for something else that happens in period 4, in the election of 1824, of Secretary of States becoming president. Just to get that into your heads for now, because it'll play a role later. I promise. So he's done a lot of things. He's a pretty qualified dude. I'd argue the guy that writes the Constitution is probably pretty qualified to be president of the country the Constitution is for, but that's just my opinion. So under his watch of 1809 to 1817, he also gets 2 terms. You know why? Because his last name is not Adams. Under him, we still see the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, which continues this problem of impressment of our sailors and our ships being seized and taken on the open seas. And again, we can't do much about it. We see under him Macone's Bill number 2, which I referenced on Monday, which gets rid of the Embargo Act. It gets rid of the Embargoes Act's successor, which was called my favorite act in Bush history?
Oh,
Non-Intercourse Act, yeah. The Non-Intercourse Act, which said we would trade with anybody but Great Britain and France. And Macone's Bill number 2 tries something new. It says, we'll trade with Great Britain or France, whoever respects our neutrality first, and we'll only trade with them. But again, this still implies that we matter or we still don't matter, and that still does not stop impressment, which is why we have a War of 1812. And also, we see all of that westward expansion under Jefferson's presidency. I showed you that map. We showed land being settled. We're marching ourselves west. Is causing a ton of conflict with the natives. Why might that cause conflict with the natives? Because we're taking their land, because they were there. Because they've already moved off of where we were, thinking, all right, fine, we'll go out to here. And what happens next? Here come the white people. All right, fine, we'll go out to here. Here come the white. So, as we're spreading, we're having conflict. I'm sure you guys read about it in your chapter. We have some conflict with Tecumseh, some conflict with other significant Native American chiefs, and we're starting to see Native Americans realizing that this idea I told you guys on Monday of mutual coexistence is not going to work. There's not going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. It's either us or them. And our argument here on the frontier, that's going to play a big role in the War of 1812, is that the problem is really with the British. It's the British who are messing with us. They're the ones giving the Indians guns, giving the Indians big ideas. They're the ones giving the Indians alcohol and resources they need. If it wasn't for the British, the Indians would just get out of our way. And we have a series of native wars that kind of coincide with the War of 1812. Under him, we have the War of 1812, and under him, we get our second bank in the United States. We talked under Jefferson, yes, that the bank expired. Did Jefferson renew the bank? No, because the bank is against his ideology. But after we fight a war, Madison, even though he's a Democratic Republican, is going to realize that we kind of need to control our economy a little better, to control inflation, to control currency, and we're going to re-charter the bank in 1816 for another 20-year term, which is going to play a huge role in a couple presidencies of Andrew Jackson. All right, so that's the background, the situation, the context, so to speak, of our conversation going forward. So there's a bunch of congressmen, who are demanding that we go to war with Great Britain. They don't really have a good reason. I mean, there's a couple good reasons, but their big reason is that the U.S. is losing its honor. We're being embarrassed on the world stage. How are we losing our honor? They're picking on us. Yeah. How have they picked on us? Impressment. But see, the fact that they can just take our stuff and we do nothing about it is embarrassing. Interesting. This popular battle cry in the early 18 teens, late 1810s, is free trade and sailors' rights. I'll write that up here because it's going to go away in a second. Free trade and sailors' rights. Now let's take a step back. Look at this map. Now, where is the area of the United States that is most based on shipping and trade and sailing and these things?
The one close to the ocean.
Yeah, not just the coast, but in general, it's the Northeast. You guys with me so far?
Yeah.
So this is the Northeast. Okay? So if I told you that a bunch of congressmen were shouting for free trade and sailors' rights to defend America's sailing honor and we're being embarrassed, where would you assume those congressmen came from?
South. No.
So let me take a step back since apparently we can't think more than 3 miles an hour today. I can. So if this is the area in which we see the most trade and sailing and shipping and commerce, I even circled it for you. That's the area. Not just New England, but also like what were the middle colonies, New York, Pennsylvania. That's the area that's most reliant on shipping and trade. You with me?
Yeah.
So that's the area that's most hurt by the embargo, yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Glad we're nodding. So if I told you all these congressmen who are representing their areas are most upset about free trade and sailors' rights, where would you assume those congressmen came from? What kind of states? Yeah, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New Jersey. Because that's the area that's being hurt by free trade and sailors' rights. Do these guys out here in Kentucky care about free trade and sailors' rights? No. Do these guys out here in Ohio, Tennessee care about free trade and sailors' rights? No, they care about growing things, settling society, making sure there's infrastructure. Interesting. All right, good. Glad we're on the same page now.
Cool.
Back to where we were. Free trade and sailors' rights. All right. But these Warhawks, turns out, are most likely found in these 3 states. Tennessee, Andrew Jackson. Kentucky, Henry Clay. Interesting. So why are they screaming about free trade and sailors' rights? Why? Does it matter to them? Does it matter to their people in their districts? Talk to me.
The rising national identity.
There's a rising national identity? Sure. Or is it possible that they really want a war, and they know their reasons for war aren't as legitimate as complaining about impressment? Maybe they want a war because they're pissed off about the British and Indian presence here on the frontier, but that's not enough to declare war. Impressment is enough to declare war. I'm waiting.
No.
No?
No.
Am I waiting or am I not waiting?
I'm trying to say, so like in the Mississippi River, like didn't the British like try to enable like the people from those states like from trading like shipping their goods?
No.
No.
So I want you to get that in your head, though, that these people calling for free trade and sailors' rights aren't the people that are being impacted by not free trade and no sailors' rights. Interesting. All right. So these Warhawks, who are they? They're going to be the next generation of important people to know. And for now, though, they're just young Democratic Republican leaders who are out in what used to be these frontier states. They are demonstrating, as Cortez just pointed out, a new American nationalism, a new American identity, that we should fight to protect our interests. The 3 names you should know are Webster, Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, John C. Calhoun. We can also add Andrew Jackson in this list. So Webster, Clay, Calhoun, and Jackson. All 4 will play a huge role in the rest of period 4. 3 of the 4 will run for president. 1 of the 4 will run for president like 15 times, it feels like. Unsuccessfully, all 15 times. One of the 4 will serve as vice president. Jackson will be president for 2 terms. So, they're just young, new blood in Congress. The old generation, the founding generation, is dying off. And this is the new form of leadership that is being born into American politics. Okay? But it goes to show, in my opinion, that our frontier congressmen are more rough, more aggressive, younger, because people moving to the frontier are more rough, aggressive, younger, and in general, people elect people that look like them, that act like them, that represent them. So our younger people in America are on the frontier because it's a rougher lifestyle, less established lifestyle, and the people they're electing look and sound and act like them. The Warhawks that are in the northern side of the frontier, out here, so over here in the Great Lakes region, Ohio, Indiana, even some parts of Pennsylvania, their argument is we should go to war with England and take Canada. We should go take Canada. The Southerners are saying we should go to war and take Florida. Where's Florida? Good, Eliam pointed. Thank you, Eliam. So the Warhawks that are Tennessee, Kentucky, even the Alabamas are arguing we should be directing our expansion southward. Whereas Ohio's and Pennsylvania's are saying we should take over all of Canada. Because that's what we need. More land with no people. Question for you. Have we even settled the Louisiana Purchase yet? No. Not even close. But here's this early American identity of taking over land. Spreading America, spreading American ideals, kicking ass, and taking names. We are like, it's a good analogy, we're like small dogs that bark a lot. Bark, bark. It's always the little dog that barks the most. Always. You are not a big, you only weigh 100 pounds. My actual dog weighs more than 100. I always laugh when I walk my dog. It's always like, you walk past a little dog, right? And the little dog's like barking. My dog's like 80 pounds. Right? About the same size as Luis, give or take. And I treat them similarly. I can treat the dog with a little more respect. And it's always the little dogs that like growl and put their chest up and bark. And I'm like, what are you doing? Right? Like, we could just punch you.
So calm, they're just like.
And the big dogs are like, yeah, whatever. Hey, what's up with the big dog? How you doing? What's up, man? How you doing? Right? But it's like dudes too, the same way. Right? It's the little dudes that are always talking the most trash. Right? It's like the little dudes got the most to say, right? Chavez has got like at least 30 pounds on it, right? And IQ points. So, but across the board, right? Back to our point about Napoleon syndrome, huh? Without the sex joke this time. So, but all these young war hawk congressmen, all of them are focused on stopping impressment. Big problem. Protecting trade and expanding our nation outward. Getting more land, getting more territory, kicking ass, and taking names. So I want to point out, though, as we just did in our do now, this is not a new problem. Britain and France have been impressing our stuff for a long time. They've been at war with each other, on and off, for 50 years. They've been violating our right to have free trade. They've been using impressment against our merchants. And every time we've tried to solve these problems, it has not worked. We have not been able to solve this problem. Washington tried with the Proclamation of Neutrality. Adams tried with the XYZ affair. And we were asked for a bribe and we got our feelings hurt and left. Jefferson tried with the embargo and it killed our economy. So we've tried things. We haven't just ignored the problem. We've tried to solve the problem. It's just been very unsuccessful. So I want you to take a minute or two with the person next to you. What options does Madison have? What could Madison and the government do at this point that might actually solve the problem? You can say going to war as long as you have another option as well. Take two. Talk about it. Try to come up with some other options for Madison. Chat it out. Yeah, big boy.
Ally himself with another nation just for this occasion to stop the war.
All right.
So back to like
So-
like a temporary.
Who's got an idea for me? Eliam, give me an idea. You're a creative man. Solve this problem for James Madison.
I was telling actually that there's really nothing else they can do because they, from what I've known so far, they've tried to hit every aspect, diplomatically or in a sense of negotiating, but they've seen nothing has worked. So really, the only way to solve this is having a conflict with
Okay.
fighting.
Okay. I like that. I like how you use the words diplomatically and negotiation and it's successful. Go ahead.
War.
War. All right, cool. There you go. Nice explanation. Ruby, you seem like a peaceful human.
Oh no.
Do you have another option?
I was telling Anastasia that maybe some type of financial or economic treaty because they're all about money. And
Are we all?
so I was saying maybe some kind of trade treaty or something where they would both gain economically from it, and it wouldn't be political because they're both trying to outdo each other to maybe but economically.
Let me push back on that. Not that you're wrong. I like the proposal by saying, didn't we kind of try that with McCone's bill number 2? We'll trade with whichever of you wants to recognize our neutrality first, and just with you, and have a sole mutual assistance. So you're not wrong. It's just been kind of tried, just not well.
The only way to do it is war.
So violent.
Yeah, because it is.
Go.
Kind of said, I don't remember when you said if you were like, at some point, just war becomes unavoidable.
At some point, war is inevitable. I asked for the Revolutionary War. No way. Give me an idea, no way.
Why don't we just start impressing their ships?
With what? With what? A little 3-ship navy? Right? Like toot toot. Here we are. Right? It's like Luis trying to like press me. It's not gonna happen, right?
Like six?
I'll just pick him up. And be like, all right, cool. As I was. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right? We're talking about a British Navy that has 250 ships. Yes. Well.
What is it?
Let me teach. You listen. Learn. Teacher? Learner. Talk to me.
Didn't they like form treaties with other nations to help them?
That's a good idea. Could form treaties with other nations. The problem is, our world is still very big. I talked to you guys in period 3 about the world shrinking.
Yeah.
Our world is still very large. So, in terms of options, our options are limited. So I like the idea. That's at least some critical thinking on both of those fronts. Better than our idea here, war. But they're both good ideas. The problem is like who. So I mean, sure, like China. But keep in mind, like a couple years prior, we didn't even know this whole continent even existed over here. We're trying to go to like our knowledge and the interconnectivity of the world is still very lacking. Really, as it comes down to like global politics and economics, I don't want to get Eurocentric on you. But France and England are it. With Spain as like the Luis Bernal of the triad, right? Or the Cerna of the Lopez-Winch connection, right? Like Spain is like the Cerna, right? Whereas like England, of course, is Winch because I'm really white. And Brett, he's really white as well.
And his friends.
Montes.
Oh.
Montes is kind of, fancy and Frenchish. Right? He's in a,
He wears jeans and a t-shirt almost every day.
so why? He says he's
That's
bagels.
not jeans.
So, moral of the story, like, despite some of these good options, we're kind of stuck here. we can just accept the impressment and stay embarrassed, or we can do something about it militarily. So knowing what we know, back to my point, where should we see the most support for war? What region? The Northeast. That's the area of the North. Yes. That's the area most damaged by impressment. Most calls for war, the justification for going to war is on this idea of free trade and sailors' rights, British interference in U.S. trade. It's important, I promise. So we would imagine that most support for the war would come from here. However, not the case. The Federalists in New England think the war would be a huge mistake. A huge mistake. They feared two things. One, we can't beat the British. Two, it's going to bankrupt our country. A third subtle thing I can add is they've always been the more pro-British group anyway, with more loyalty to England as it was. So it shouldn't be a surprise to us as well that the Federalists in New England are kind of anti-war with England. However, it's those in the West and the South that want to go to war, mostly because they want to gain Canada and Spanish Florida. Interesting. By 1810, to the last part of that question, what was the result? By 1810, the Warhawks in Congress, led by Clay of Kentucky and Calhoun of South Carolina, oh, there's South Carolina again, are going to demand war with England. They're going to demand war. Madison, as president, finally gives in and asks Congress for a declaration of war, which we're going to read in a second, leading to a huge growth of patriotism in America and go us. As this war becomes titled the Second American Revolution, which I'd argue if you need a second one, maybe the first one was not quite as successful as you thought. You saw this on YouTube? Cool, man. Good for you. Hold on quick. You can call him. Call him. Call Mr. Banks and let him know all that cool stuff you learned from YouTube. So, back to a causation standpoint before we read our text. The war's causes are pretty clear. Impressment and British influence on the western frontier. Which cause do you guys think is more important?
Western frontier.
Which is the more legitimate cause to go to war? Impressment. But yet the people who were impacted by impressment, do they want war or not?
No.
Ah.
Oh,
Wait,
You guys saw the same thing?
impressment is impacting those in New England. Those are the ones who are anti-war. So really,
Doesn't this also set a precedent for the future, since we're going to be fighting, we're going to use like...
questionable justification?
Yeah. Like with Spain and the Caribbean, I think.
Yeah. You're not wrong. The people we should know in this case are Calhoun, Clay, Webster, Jackson. And there are some in the country, despite this big patriotism, they're going to be anti-war. Largely the Federalists are anti-war. For economic and political reasons. Economically, they're the ones who most benefit from trade with England. If we fight England, we can't trade with England. Politically, war increases what? Patriotism. Patriotism. Support for your country. Who's in charge of the country? Democratic Republicans are in charge of the country. So Federalists realize war makes people excited about their country. People get excited about their country. That's good for the Democratic Republicans. The old style Democratic Republicans, not the Warhawks, but the old school ones, are not into the war either because they think it's a bad idea. And of course, all of New England, because of trade, and merchants are very anti-war. So this is a very famous, popular propaganda slogan that gets poster that gets published. It says, "We owe allegiance to no crown. There's America standing proud. We have ships in the background. Lady Liberty giving us due to crown." He's got some badass sideburns. So the patriotism for the war increases. And what I'm going to have you guys read is Madison's message to Congress asking for war. So you're going to read it. I'm going to the whole thing. It's a brief 5 paragraphs. This is his address to Congress in which he's asking for them to declare war. I'm going to give you 6 minutes just to read it closely and tell me what is his argument for war. How is he arguing in favor of war?
Again.
6 minutes? Read.
Kevin, it's your fault.
What's up? No, not the Federalist opposition, just the war message of Madison. .90 seconds left. How is he arguing for the war? So take a minute, please talk to the person next to you. What is Madison's big push for war? How does he justify it? What are his reasons for asking for war? Take two and chat it out. Go real quick.
Straight up says like British have been in the practice of violation of American title of the Great Taiwan Nation after like carrying off the
That Britain has also been supporting the Native Indians attack on America.
Okay, so it says that Britain has been attacking American ships and taking the. And on the back it says that Britain has been supporting the Native Indians to attack America.
That's what he's talking about this part, right? How he's influencing the thing. So that's
I got it.
What? You barely moved. We could like fight each other.
Unless you know.
shut up.
All right. I'm getting a series of messages from him. Which one's always the last one? All right. Who wants to hear about you to get your pastor? All right. Talk to me, please, Kat. What's one of the reasons he's demanding war? Okay. They're hostile to us? Okay. Yeah, they're not letting us be independent. They're forcing us into a conflict, not letting us be independent. Benjamin.
they're seizing the ship.
Yeah! Impressment! Chavez.
Here basically says that trading with British, they have constant intercourse with British without connecting. Well, basically saying that.
Man, that's rough. Constant intercourse?
That's crazy.
Wow, as hell. Yeah. It is difficult to account for the activity and combination which have been for some time developing themselves among tribes that are in contact with the British traders without connecting their hostility with that influence. Can you prove that?
Yeah.
Let me read it back. Last paragraph. There's new warfare renewed by the savages on one of our frontiers. It's ugly war, it's causing trouble. It is difficult to account for the activity and combinations which have been developing without connecting their hostility with that influence, and by basically, he's blaming Britain for the Indian attacks. Can he prove that?
No.
Read it again, he can't. He's making an assumption. It's difficult. It's very hard to figure out why the natives are attacking us without assuming it's the British fault. Yes, ma'am.
So you're gonna talk about how like Madison justifies it by saying that they're predicting and it's not working, but
Okay.
also because the British interfere with their American nationalism,
Yeah.
which is why they're willing to go to war to defend their pride, I guess.
Would you argue? Very well done. That this is an Eastern argument or a Western argument? Going back to our map. Is this an Eastern argument or a Western argument? Is it?
Eastern.
How many of his points mention the frontier or the natives? One. How many of his arguments mention trade, shipping?
Multiple.
The whole front page.
Yeah, but the Eastern Federation.
That's not the point. It's not what I'm asking you for. In his message, is it more of an Eastern argument or a Western argument? Interesting. But isn't it the East that doesn't want the war in the first place? Interesting. All right. So many pop-ups. Please read the argument against the war. This is a New England Federalist congressman who's going to basically look at Madison's messages and say, no, these are reasons that you've given us why we should not go to war. And he answers the same question. What are the arguments against the war? Why? Why are they opposed? Take 5, please. Read it and answer, and then we'll get into the next chunk of our lecture.
Opium. What drug?
What's putting us to sleep over the wrongs by the why are we ignoring the wrongs being done by other countries and just focusing on England? So why? What are arguments against the war? You guys are getting better at reading and writing quickly. I dig it. Go figure. Really good job. Love it. Love it. Tyler, good job. Henry, good job. Henry's the real G. You don't even know. Yeah, I like it. Brady, I like it. Luis, I like it.
Their navy was getting stronger.
What?
Because their navy was getting stronger.
Yeah.
They could have.
Go from three boats to 5? But keep in mind, like in order to impress, like they're impressing us when we get to them. Yes, we need to impress them when they came to us. They're not coming to us sometimes because of trade differences. Starting Monday. How about something right now?
No, but
At 11:56 on Thursday.
homework.
Yeah, how long you been speaking Spanish? Take a minute and talk about the opposition. Why is this dude opposed to war with Great Britain? What is his argument against the war? 1 minute, chat it out, go. Go.
So, the first part was speaking about the French. This person is arguing that Britain is a little bit less attack American States. The French are also involved in this conflict, and if they enter a war against Britain, they're only helping the French. Second paragraph is talking about that going to war is really too much choice right now. They're going up against one of the best navies in the world, and they barely have navy. And the last one is that, yeah, it's going to be bad.
Tomorrow. The point is, if you wait until tomorrow to do something, tomorrow never comes. There's always another tomorrow. All right, so you guys back up here with me. Kelly, I saw some good responses on your paper, my friend. What's one of the reasons why this dude is anti-war with England?
He argued that while French was doing wrong things to us, we don't go to war with them. Yeah, we go to war with Britain, and they did the same thing.
So is it almost like saying that we're not really going to war for impressment at all? I don't know. Because the French are impressing our boats, the British are impressing our boats. We don't have a problem with the French. Why the British? What do the British have that the French don't?
Navy.
No? What?
Land.
Land. Land where? Land in North America. What else do the British have that the French don't have? The British have what?
No, like they have ports, like ships.
What else do the British have the French don't have? That maybe the French used to have? What? No, but yes. It's an I word I'm looking for.
Independence.
Influence on Native Americans.
Oh wow.
So is it almost like saying, almost, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, almost like saying that yes, we're pissed off about impressment, but impressment just becomes the vehicle to fight a bigger war because we want land? Interesting. So is this a war for maritime rights, which means like open seas, trade? Is this a war for maritime rights or a war for territory? I don't know. But when I look at Madison's war message, it screams about maritime rights. The rights of the open seas and sailors and this. But when I look at this Federalist critique, bless you, I see a good argument that says, if we're so mad about maritime rights, why aren't we fighting the French? And then I look at who's supporting the war, and the region that's most impacted by impressment is like, no, we shouldn't go to war. And the region that would benefit from more land is like, hell yeah, let's go to war. The Northeasterners who are most concerned with maritime rights are like, no, we don't need to go to war, it's a bad idea. But the South and the West, who most want to expand territorially, are saying, yeah, let's go to war. Interesting, isn't it? What a concept. So I ask you in your notes, to what extent can we consider the War of 1812 a Western war with Eastern labels? Respond to that for me, please. To what extent can we refer to the War of 1812 as a Western war, a war for Western motivation, with Eastern labels, with an Eastern title on it, Eastern justification on it? It's a good question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought of
Go figure. You're a little bit like, oh, this is crazy. A little bit. Almost like. Almost.
Rights? Rights?
No.
So, the argument I think is compelling. It's a Western war because those that really support the war are in the West, with Eastern labels. What's the Eastern label? Impressment. Madison argues it's because of impressment. The Warhawks argue it's because of impressment. Free trade, sailors' rights. And yet the area most impacted by impressment is like, no war. Compelling, I think. Compelling. You can tell a lot about why a war is being fought, especially early in American history, what the real motivation is, by what region supports it. Right? In the Revolutionary War, more of the support is in the North and the East and the Middle colonies, where they're more reliant on trade and they're more economically self-sufficient. When the the tobacco South is like, no, we don't need war. We're good. So the War of 1812 does not go well, the actual war itself. The U.S. has a very small navy. The U.S. has a very poorly trained army because of Jefferson's presidency, cutting the size of the army, cutting the size of these things. Britain's army and navy are very well trained. They've been fighting France for a decade. Our big hope is that England and France will continue fighting. England will be divided between the two and will be able to win because England will be distracted by France in Europe. It does not go well when England defeats France in Europe and they can turn all their attention to us and then we're like, oh shit. We're not prepared for this. This is not going well. The war goes very badly in the early years, very badly. We try to invade Canada. Big mistake. Goes poorly. Canada's a big place. We invade Canada. They respond by invading Washington, D.C. Right at the Chesapeake Bay. Right to Washington, D.C. The British attack and burn our national capital. We had just finished building the White House. We just moved the capital from Philadelphia, New York. The conversation about where the capital was going to be. We finally settled on Washington, D.C. We finally put the capital in Washington, D.C. and they came and burned that shit down. Assholes. Assholes. I have a funny video to show you.
Oh, cool.
Not funny, but it's entertaining.
My water bottle.
Yep.
Wait, what? Yeah,
Don't worry about what I have. How do you have it? Don't worry about what I have.
What's going to be a president?
He's not.
Oh.
Good old times.
No, it's commercial.
Can we hear it?
Relax. Oh, where did it go? Nope, I don't want to see the ad for that. We're good.
Do we charge like more in card duties more than our domestic?
Alright. Alright, just watch.
200 years ago this month, 4,000 British soldiers lay siege to Washington, D.C. and set fire to the U.S. Capitol and the White House. And the burn marks on the White House walls are still there.
We now have evidence of the char marks, the scorching that would have happened when flames were drawn out through open windows and doors and licked up around the tops of the stone.
William Allman is the White House curator. Is this the best evidence of the one-time enemy forces were in our nation's capital?
As far as I know.
The burning of Washington was the darkest moment for the United States and President James Madison in the War of 1812, a sort of second war of American independence. The British had been interfering with American trade at sea and kidnapping sailors. American efforts to expand westward and north into Canada were being thwarted by the British. 2 years into the war, with the Americans in retreat, British forces reached the nation's capital. What was Washington like in 1814?
Miserable. Tiny, small, strung out.
William Allen is historian emeritus for the architect of the Capitol. It was a construction site.
It was a construction site, and there were stone yards and brick yards and kilns, and it was just a mishmash.
The Capitol dome hadn't yet been built, but the original House chamber, located on the site of today's Statuary Hall, was an architectural masterpiece, recreated in these digital images.
Many people described it as the most beautiful room in America. It had this glorious ceiling with the 100 skylights.
Was it a fireproof room?
The room was fireproof except for the ceiling, and that, of course, was the Achilles heel of the room. The ceiling was wooden, and all they had to do, of course, is to catch the ceiling on fire. When it fell down, the rest of the room would be destroyed. The heat was intense. The glass in the skylights melted, became molten, and fell down in large chunks.
The Capitol's stone walls survived, as well as the Senate vestibule, with its distinctive corncob columns. And what is the significance of the corncobs?
Well, the significance is the American plant in a classical way, sort of thinking the way classical architects would have thought, using this very important state of the American diet and the American economy.
And fighting with the British that night were former American slaves.
You know, the British brilliantly exposed a real weak side in American society, and that was slavery and our dependence on slaves. And
historian Steve Vogel is author of a blow-by-blow account of Washington's capture.
And they offered freedom to slaves in this region, in the Chesapeake. Said, you know, come over to our side. You know, we promise you freedom.
All right. You guys can't listen to a movie without whispering on the side. We'll just watch it. You don't know who you are?
It's very funny.
All right. I'm so sorry, Luis, that movie bothered you so much you couldn't stay quiet for 2 minutes. Reality sucks. So, as you can see, the war does not go well because our capital got burned down, which is never a good sign in a war when the capital gets actually burned down. I also want to point out the fact that the guy did point out that the Capitol building is built fireproof except for the roof, which is just not really smart construction because fire goes up and roofs in general are up, so not the best idea. So, again, to highlight the difference in the two sides, the British Navy at this time has 800 ships. The U.S. Navy has 12. So yeah, we're ready to go. Not the best of things. Not the best of things. Here's some examples. These are paintings of the British and lighting things on fire. The original copy of the Declaration of Independence has to be evacuated out of Washington, D.C. And hidden in somebody's house. Try to keep the British Army from destroying that as well. And shortly after, as you look here, there's Washington, D.C., there's Baltimore, the next biggest city in the region. The British forces continued up the Chesapeake Bay. There's Chesapeake again, our friend. And they, what's called laid siege, or surrounded a fort and bombed it all night. And this is where the national anthem comes from. If you listen to the language of the national anthem, it's written by, it's a funny thing, we're so proud about the song, we get mad now when NFL players won't stand up for it. And the song itself is about a prisoner of war watching America get bombed to all hell from a ship overnight. It's like, yeah, American pride. If you know the words of the song, a guy wakes up in the morning and the flag is still there after being bombed all night. So you ask most Americans what war our national anthem came from, what would be their guess?
World War II.
Yeah, the Revolution. The War for Independence. And instead, it's not that. It's a war that we instead just fight the British for not really much of a reason and time. But hey, American pride. So the British are winning the war, let's be honest. Much like the last time we fought the British. What did we do the last time? We kicked the British in the shins long enough until they got tired of fighting and went away. Agreed?
Yeah.
Did we win the Revolutionary War? No. We just didn't. We didn't lose. Same thing's gonna happen. Britain is winning. They're also fighting the French at the same time. Britain is actually shockingly war-weary because they've been fighting wars for much of the last 2 centuries. And they want to end the war as well. They think it's ridiculous. We're not really fighting for much. So in 1814, we signed the Treaty of Ghent, which ends the Revolutionary War. It ends the Revolutionary War. Where's Ghent? Why is it called the Treaty of Ghent? It's signed in Ghent. He has a good name. Ghent is in Belgium, right here. And we signed the Treaty of Ghent, and the war is over. Now, during the war, there's also some significant conflicts on the western frontier. We see Tecumseh's War, in which we're fighting the Native Americans under Tecumseh's rule. In 2 important battles, the Battle of Tippecanoe. I only say that because that's going to give us a president later. I'll explain when we get to William Henry Harrison. The Battle of the Thames. And also the Creek War, which is further south in like Georgia, Alabama region. The Battle of Horseshoe Bend. But in these, we see, again, over time, American numbers overwhelming native troops on the frontier, and natives are forced to fall back there as well. So answer me the question there, though. How, in this way, how is the War of 1812 similar to the French and Indian War? Right, how is this a similar conversation with what happens in the French and Indian War? Make sure you respond to the question. Try there your notes. I think it kind of makes sense. About a minute 30, make sure that question gets answered for me, please. So, the War of 1812, I'll talk about the treaty that ends it in a minute. The War of 1812 doesn't really settle anything, but it has one super unintended consequence that nobody really saw coming, and that's the death of the Federalist Party. Let me tell you why. So, these New England states we already talked about up here, in American history, where are the Federalists most heavily located?
North.
Yeah, north, in the New England region. Good. So, the New England states in general are against the war from the get-go. Even though you would think if it's a war for impressment, they would be all about the war. In 1814, a bunch of Federalists are going to call a convention or a meeting in Hartford. It'll be called the Hartford Convention. Yeah, you guys are getting used to this. This is good. This is good. And during the war, they're going to have this meeting, and we're going to read their whole platform in a minute. But they're going to propose some pretty drastic changes to American society and government. They're going to say, we need 7 new amendments out of the Constitution right now. We need 7 new amendments. That's a big change. We need to make sure we strengthen states' rights. Which is ironic because what were they a party of before? National government authority. They want to strengthen states' rights, which is of course ironic. And they want to make sure that northern interests are protected. They're going to subtly hint that if they don't get their way, they can secede or pull out of the country and make their own country. And that doesn't really get support, but it gets a lot of rumors going. Now, this convention is really terribly timed. Because what does this make them look like during war? Cowards, sure, not what I'm looking for.
Enemies?
Traitors, enemies, unpatriotic, un-American. To do this during war. So I'm going to have you read quick. These are their 7 proposals. Identify each of them. What are the 7 things they want changed about the government, and figure out why. Why do they want these 7 things changed? Okay? And then once we're finished that, we'll figure out why is this then looked at as very unpatriotic and very, very selfish. So I'm going to give you 7 minutes, 1 for each of them. Yeah. Read quickly. Identify what are their proposals and why. Go for it. What are the demands they're making of society? And why? About 3 minutes left. What do all of these demands have in common in terms of where they are and what they want? Yellow?
Yeah, please.
You want a skinny one instead? I might have one.
No, that's good.
Good. All right. Once you figure out what they're demanding, try to think to yourself, why? Put some bridges together and figure out what are they trying to get at here. Why might they want no new states? Why might they want a one-term president? Why might they want restrictions on citizenship? Why might they want, and on and on. Why might they want Congress not having power for an embargo? Make it work. Think about how it fits in the argument. What kind of population? Read it again. What's that trying to get rid of? Think about it. What is that trying to get rid of? If the taxes are apportioned only among the citizens, what is that trying to get rid of? Oh man, that's why I like you. Amongst other reasons, I like you for a lot of reasons. Not your Spanish skills, but your history skills are top notch. Read the first one again.
Okay, don't worry. I don't know my husband.
Think about it. Oh, see? How could you have? All right, guys. Take a minute to two to get your minds around. I want you to have a good, enriching conversation. What is the general goal of these resolutions? What are they trying to do? Big picture. And don't just tell me they're trying to do change the tax structure. No, together, all 7 of these as one unified proposal, what are they trying to do? 2 minutes, go. No, that's not right. What does that mean? What is that trying to do?
Big picture.
Big picture. Yes. No. How it fits down.
That means they
This is the most specific about intercourse.
yeah, they're really tricky. Yeah, that's more
Oh, research. Nobody's there. Yeah, I got you. Not yet today. All right. So together, what are they trying to do? Ruby. What is the big unifying theme of these propositions? To reinforce Federalist power, I agree. Cortez, take it a step further. Good job.
Beyond just like enforcing themselves and their power, they want to weaken Democratic Republican like influence and power not only in the executive and congressional branches, but also in popular opinion and how to view.
So they don't like the way the government is running. So what are they trying to do?
Regain power.
Change the government to suit their needs. Question for you: is this the first time they've done this?
No.
Give me another example.
When they added more Federalists into
The midnight judges. What else have they done? Alien and Sedition Acts. Yes. Rather than change, they're trying to change the system. Yes. That's why I said about 8 fights ago, the New England Federalists were against the war. And then the election map from 1808, 1812 had Federalists on it. There's not the presidency either. So let's run through these real quick. Santos, what is the first one trying to do?
It's trying to get rid of the 3/5 compromise that would like take away power from the South.
They're trying to get rid of the 3/5 compromise. It says citizenship and taxes should only be based on free persons. Damn. Second one. Go ahead.
New states can be added to the union by Congress because they have the majority vote of 2/3 of both houses.
Perfect. So they're making it harder to add new states. Where are all these new states?
In the West.
In the West. Well, who are they voting for? Democratic Republicans. Third, Congress can't embargo more than 60 days because the embargo hurt them. Obviously, it's not an impressment issue. If they're like, don't embargo us, we just want to ship. Fourth, don't let Congress regulate trade between us and other nations. That was one of their big things they wanted in the Constitution, though, regulation of interstate commerce. Fifth, Congress can't declare war except with 2/3 of both houses, because that's a higher majority. And sixth, no new citizens. In a sense of no new, not born people can serve in the government. Seventh, that'd be a really important one as well. Only one-term presidency. And can't be from the same state back to back. Because they're all salty, all these presidents can come from Virginia. Just for fun, the next president after this comes from Virginia. Yeah. So look at all this though. Why would this make them seem unpatriotic?
Because they're selfish.
They're selfish. Yeah. In the middle of war, they're trying to suit things to best benefit them. So their big platform is more economic support for New England. They want a higher threshold of votes for embargoes, for new states, and for war. They want to get rid of the 3/5 compromise. They only want a one-term presidency. And they want to make sure that it basically rotates between different states. And even the radicals in Hartford are talking about secession. This makes them, as soon as they do this and this gets published, like almost concurrently. It's like, oh, the Federalists are wilding out doing crazy things. Oh, the war's over, we won. So the timing is really bad. It backfires on them as well. They are perceived as traitors, and they are incredibly weakened as a national power. Because all this is happening, all the War of 1812 is still going on. Right, they want to get rid of the Virginia dynasty for presidencies. They want to get rid of Southern control of Congress because of the 3/5 compromise. And then I have a cartoon for you. This is a really bad example. Let me find you a better one. Keep in mind that we're using cartoons that are 206 years old. So, you know. Terry. Get that mint chip polo. Depends on my mood.
Like if I have an option, like I will, I don't know for men, if they don't have it, so I feel like then strawberry.
I don't like rock and roll. I'm not a chocolate. My wife likes Alright, guys, I need you quiet.
Wrong. You know, it's good to have an opinion.
It's not okay to have an opinion. Alright, so
Yeah.
here's the cartoon for you. Take a minute with your partner. What do you notice? What message is this cartoon trying to say? Yeah, you can see it on the board. So, what do you see from a messaging standpoint this cartoon is trying to say across? Yo.
Oh, that's clean. You know, and well, this one is like, I don't know. I want to say like Sabrina. This one's like
Oh,
That's what you're talking about right now? Alright, Josue has volunteered to explain the entire cartoon because he knew it so well. Then he decided to start talking about basketball with Eliam, which will probably be the last thing that happens in this class. I hope. I imagine, and I will ensure. So, Josue, why don't you enlighten the rest of the class with the real deep understanding of this cartoon since you knew it so well it was time to talk about basketball. Go for it. You're not sure. Interesting. But you were sure about talking about the Celtics, weren't you? Eliam, why don't you help him out? Since you obviously knew it so well that you thought it was okay to have conversations about basketball on the side. Oh! Y'all both wild. Because that's what I do when I don't understand something. I think, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ignore my problems and talk about basketball. The stuff that really matters. I'm going to get a 5 on the AP NBA test.
That sounds a lot like Michael. It sounds like Michael.
Hey, Mr. Winchell, I'm a little confused about this cartoon. You think you can explain it to me? Try that. Oh, what's up, Josue? What can I do for you? I would love to help you, Josue. But first, what are your opinions on the NBA? I'm just kidding. I don't give a shit. Kenny.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you mind if I get breath stripped?
So, who do we think these guys are? No? 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 Well, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Well, not even close. You're just assuming because there's 3 of them and I gave you 3 names earlier? No. Look at the message of the cartoon. Who's this guy? The Hartford Convention or leap, no leap? Oh, my Yankee boys. Jump in, my fine fellows. Plenty of goods to smuggle. Titles of nobility to bargain. Ooh. These are the Federalists. And they're debating jumping back in with Britain. Pro or anti-Federalist cartoon? Very anti. Context, the Hartford Convention and radical discussion of secession. Audience, those that disagree with the Federalist perspective on the war. Purpose, to portray the Federalists as traitors, unpatriotic, treasonous. Point of view? Yeah, Democratic Republican, against the Federalists. Good. Good.
Who's the dude under the bridge? Bob.
I strongly and most profoundly pray. He's praying they don't do it. a good cartoon. So again, this just goes to show this goes. What's our confusion?
Now he clarified for you.
Cool. Good. This goes to show how this Hartford Convention is going to kill the Federalists credibility-wise, which is too bad, because they've been making. Look, if he's going to go to the bathroom and leave, he can get cut up afterwards. So we don't go to the bathroom. The Federalists have been making a subtle comeback because of the Embargo Act and the financial difficulties, but this is going to be the final nail in their coffin, so to speak. So the Treaty of Ghent ends the war. This further proves my point. The Treaty of Ghent does not even address the issue of our neutrality in shipping. Our neutrality in being able to ship with multiple countries when they're at war, which is impressment, is not even addressed in the treaty. So how can you tell me it's a war to end impressment when the war, according to the treaty that ends it, doesn't end impressment? The treaty ending the war is unanimously ratified or approved by the Senate, but there are some significant effects we should be aware of. First, it ends all Indian-British alliances in the West. Further evidence. This is a Western war of expansion with Eastern labels. Second, it scares Spain again, like our last treaty with Spain, with England did. It scares Spain into giving us Florida. The Adams-Onis Treaty, signed in 1819, gives us Florida. Cool, thanks, Spain. Didn't this happen last time too? Jay's Treaty scared them into giving us access to the port of New Orleans, and the Pinckney Treaty, yeah. Another effect, the lack of Federalist loyalty was a fatal death blow to the party's support. And other than that, it's called status quo antebellum. It's a good phrase. It's Latin. Teach you some good languages in this class. What does it mean to refer to the status quo? The norm, right? The way things are. Anybody know what antebellum means? Who knows what anta means? As a prefix. Anta? Not anti is against. Anta. Anta's before. What?
No, he's saying good. He was telling you got some sugar.
I'm speaking. Let's go back to the Latin. The norm. Anta, you guys said this before. Bellum. Conflict. So as things were before the war. What does the war solve? Nothing. What's the one thing we can look to and say we got that out of the war?
Independence. I mean.
Honor. Florida comes from Spain, though. This is the big one. It ends the British alliance of the natives on the frontier. So then can you again argue that the war's not about impressment at all? Yes, sir.
So it doesn't resolve impressment?
No. The treaty does not address our neutrality, which is where impressment comes from.
So they're still doing it?
It declines afterwards, but the treaty itself has nothing to do with it. Interesting.
So Britain can do it today?
No.
Oh, wait.
No.
What
you tell me what's going on this time. Okay? I gotta sit down for this one.
No, British, England was looking to China. They're looking to trade.
So, we get Spain to give us Florida in the Adams-Onis Treaty. That's a big deal.
Yep.
Now, let me tell you something else that comes off of this war. It's kind of a fun story that you guys can enjoy. Maybe you read a little bit about it. The Treaty of Ghent is signed in the very end of 1814. You with me? So then you go in your notes. It's just a fun story. So, is the war immediately over when the treaty's signed? Why not? What? Yeah, we don't know. Belgium is far away. So the war is going to go on for another 3 or 4 months before we know the war is actually over. Because we got to get news from Belgium all the way to the capital We get to the capital's burned down. Oh, shit. Who do we tell now? And then we have people fighting all over the country. We got to go figure out how to tell them the war is over. So long story short, the war goes on for another 3 or 4 months. While this is happening, we have the British attempting to invade the city of New Orleans. Here's New Orleans again being very important to American history. Here's New Orleans on the Mississippi River. New Orleans is right here. I'll circle it for you. Now the British Army and Navy is going to launch an attack on the city of New Orleans. New Orleans is defended by a man and his army by the name of Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was a young boy during the Revolutionary War, and still he and his brothers fought for the American independence. He was like an 11-year-old prisoner of war. He had fought in Native American conflicts in Georgia and Florida. He has a bullet lodged in his chest, stuck in his ribs from a duel, like a Hamilton Burr duel that he had as a young kid. He eventually will die from that 30 years later from lead poisoning. The bullet in his chest gradually poisons him to death. So, long story short, this guy's a tough dude, and he's defending the American city of New Orleans, even though the war's already over. You guys with me so far? Just nobody knows it's over. So the British have their huge invasion of New Orleans planned. They get their boats ready. They invade with their hundreds, about 1,000 men. They get up to the fort of New Orleans and realize that they forgot the ladders.
Are you serious?
Swear to God. So they need to scale a large wall, seawall, fence to continue their invasion, and they look around like, I thought you brought the ladders. You never been that? What do you mean I was supposed to bring the ladders? Long story short, they don't have, you have one job to bring the damn ladders. Nobody brought the ladders. So now, instead of using ladders to climb into the fort and defeating Andrew Jackson, they are at the bottom of the wall like this, being shot by the American soldiers, and it's all because they forgot the ladders. Now, in America, we don't care that the war is over. We look at this as a huge, patriotic, emphatic end of the war victory, because America finds out we won the Battle of New Orleans, and then the treaty is signed. So we look at this, to this day, there is a giant statue of Andrew Jackson on a horse in the middle of New Orleans for winning a battle in a war that was already over because the British forgot their ladders. This makes Andrew Jackson a national hero. A hero to the United States, for the hero of New Orleans, for winning a battle in a war that was already over because the British forgot their ladders. Fast forward 9 years. Andrew Jackson is running for president as a war hero for winning a battle in a war that was already over because the British forgot their ladders. He loses, but because he's such a hero to the people, 4 years later he wins the presidency for the first of 2 terms for winning a battle in a war that was already over because the British forgot their ladders. Your boy did in fact finesse the whole presidency. So, from an impact standpoint, we have such national pride. Did we win the war? What? Thank you, Luis. We didn't lose the war. For the second time in 38 years, we have fought the British, and go America, we have not lost. For the second time in 38 years, we have kicked them in the shin long enough until they went away. From a political standpoint, we have what's called the era of good feelings, because the Federalists are dead. We have a time of political happiness because there's just one political party. We're going to, and this is a preview for Monday, but we're going to begin developing our own industrial capacity because of things like the embargo. Sorry, Jefferson, your plan backfired. Our own manufacturing ability, because when you fight with England, you can't exactly import things from England. We're going to see a new emphasis on developing our own infrastructure, our own military. But big picture, we're given a little more international respect. People respect us because we won a battle in a war that was already over because the British forgot their left. Yep. The natives are weakened because they lose their British alliance. When they used to rely on the French, then they rely on the British, and they have nobody. And this is really going to increase our desire to move west. The Louisiana Purchase, this war, the Adams-Onis Treaty, the weakening of the natives is going to allow us to move westward in a very, very rapid way. So I have a picture up front. So the 4th of July celebration in 1819. I want you to take 1 minute, please. Talk to your partner. What do you see? What does this reveal? What about American politics is different in this picture that might not have been as present prior? 1 minute, and then we'll do our closure. Go for it.
Yeah.
Kenny. Later.
Yes, that's the last one.
There. Oh, that's a good word. Oh, I see you, Elio. You're back on my good side.
There's a dog. Look, you see the dog? Okay, it's a cat. But I'm just saying there's a dog.
It's showing that they're more unified after the war.
It's showing that they're more unified.
Not yet.
Well, all
That's
this
more modern.
like, you see like one guy with like
There
a
might
farm
well
or
be.
another.
We're a dog-loving nation.